W, the Attitude Era, and the Classic Eras. Possibly two of the most well-known and best-liked eras in the WWE. Today, I'm going to be putting both of them, well, not putting both of them, I'm going to merge them together and put them in this universe mode. We're doing the same old simulate a year. Pay-per-views are staying the same, and when I say I'm merging the two eras together, I'm more specifically saying that I'm merging the rosters of the two eras and the superstars who participate in the two eras. But yeah, we're gonna go one full year. Pay-per-views stay the same. So like here we got Money in the Bank. Let's do this. Starting off the night with Triple H versus Kane for the WWE Championship. I forgot to tell y'all, Triple H is starting champions. Triple H is your starting WWE champion. Jake the Snake Roberts is your starting IC champion, and your starting women's champion is Lita. As we got Kane versus Triple H, Shane McMahon versus Roddy Piper, Mark Henry versus Jim the Anvil Neidhart. We got Stephanie McMahon versus Lita for the women's title, Molly Holly versus Trish Stratus, Dusty Rhodes versus Brutus Beefcake, Booker T versus Christian, Matt Hardy versus Jake the Snake Roberts for the IC title, Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. We got Brock, Shawn, Brett, Andre, Steve, Austin, Warrior, Razor, and Edge in the Money in the Bank ladder match. The Rock versus Eddie and this randomized ladder match. Look. This shit really hates me. Sheamus was never in the Attitude Era. Even though he could have, because he was old back then. Well, old enough to participate back then, but I think he was busy in the indies. Triple H retains. Roddy Piper wins. Jim wins. Lita retains. Trish wins. Dusty wins. Christian wins. Jake retains. Kurt Angle wins. Brock is Mr. Money in the Bank. Eddie wins, and Taker wins that match. Next up, we got Backlash. And for this, we are starting off with Bret Hart versus The Undertaker. After that, we got Matt Hardy versus Jake Roberts for the IC title, Trish Stratus versus Lita for the women's title, Triple H versus Mr. McMahon. Son-in-law versus father-in-law. Big Show versus Shawn Michaels, Brock Lesnar versus Kane, The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero, and Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. Taker wins. Jake wins. Lita retains. Jake Roberts retains. Lita retains. Triple H wins. Shawn Michaels wins. Kane wins. The Rock wins. And Jeff Hardy wins. Extreme Rules time. We got Brock Lesnar versus Kane, Matt Hardy versus Jake Roberts for the IC title, Undertaker versus Vince, Ric Flair versus Randy Savage, Big Show versus Triple H for the title, Steve Austin versus Andre the Giant. Oh Jesus. Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero, and Stephanie McMahon versus Lita for the women's title in the main event. Brock Lesnar beats Kane, Jake Roberts retains, Undertaker wins, Randy Savage wins, Triple H retains, Steve Austin wins, Brett wins, The Rock wins. And Stephanie McMahon is the new women's champion. Over. The biggest party of the summer. SummerSlam. Opened up the night with Ric Flair versus Randy Savage. We got Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. Trish Stratus versus Stephanie McMahon. Shane McMahon versus Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. Jeff Hardy versus... Jeff Hardy. Oh my fucking god. Matt Hardy versus Jake Roberts for the IC title. Ultimate Warrior and Lita versus Christian and Molly Holly. Diesel versus Andre the Giant. Ted DiBiase versus Dusty Rhodes. The Undertaker versus Bret Hart. The Rock versus Shawn Michaels. Brock Lesnar versus Eddie Guerrero. And Triple H, Kane, and the Big Show in the main event. Ric Flair wins. Kurt Angle wins. Stephanie retains. Jim wins. Vince wins. Jake Roberts retains. Christian and Molly Holly win. Andre wins. Dusty wins. Taker wins. The Rock wins. Brock Lesnar wins. And in the main event, Triple H retains. Let's go over to Hell in a Cell. We got Steve Austin versus Andre the Giant opening up the show. We got Ted DiBiase versus Dusty Rhodes. Triple H versus Mr. McMahon. Matt Hardy versus Jake Roberts for the IC title. Kane versus Shawn Michaels. Big Show versus The Rock. Undertaker versus Bret Hart. Brock Lesnar versus Eddie Guerrero. And Molly Holly versus Stephanie McMahon in the main event. Austin wins. Ted wins. Triple H wins. Jake Roberts retains. Kane wins. The Rock wins. Bret wins. Eddie wins. And Stephanie McMahon retains. And on over to Super Duper Showdown. Let's see what the hell we got for tonight. We got The Undertaker versus Bret Hart. Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. Molly Holly versus Stephanie McMahon. Brock Lesnar versus Vince McMahon. Razor Ramon versus Randy Savage. Big Show versus Shawn Michaels. The Rock versus Kane. Ric Flair versus Steve Austin. Eddie Guerrero versus Triple H for the title. And Matt Hardy versus Jake Roberts for the IC title. Bret wins. Jeff wins. Stephanie retains. Brock wins. Randy wins. Big Show wins. Kane wins. Ric Flair wins. Eddie Guerrero is the new WWE champion, and Matt Hardy is the new Intercontinental champion. Let's see, we got Undertaker versus Ultimate Warrior. Jeff versus Matt for the Intercontinental title. Molly Holly versus Stephanie McMahon for the women's title. Big Show versus Razor Ramon. Ted DiBiase, Shawn Michaels, Mark Henry, and the Big Boss Man versus Andre the Giant, Triple H, Papa Shango, and Vince McMahon. Diesel versus Steve Austin. Bret Hart versus Ric Flair. Brock Lesnar versus Eddie Guerrero for the title. Jesus Christ. And The Rock versus Kane. Warrior wins. Matt Hardy retains. Stephanie retains. Razor wins. Ted DiBiase wins. Steve Austin wins. Bret wins. Brock Lesnar is the new WWE champion. Jesus Christ. Eddie Guerrero was a damn transitional champion. The Rock wins in the main event. Tables, ladders, and chairs. We got Ric Flair versus Andre the Giant. Christian and Lita versus Big Boss Man and Trish Stratus. Molly Holly versus Stephanie McMahon. Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. Okay, anyways, back to this. We got Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon, Jim Neidhart versus Edge, Jeff and Matt for the IC title, Kurt Angle versus Ted DiBiase, Undertaker versus Ultimate Warrior, Razor Ramon versus Diesel, Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart, The Rock versus Eddie Guerrero, and Brock Lesnar, Big Show, and Kane in a triple threat TLC match for the title. Ric Flair wins, Christian wins, Stephanie McMahon wins. Stephanie retains, Austin wins, Edge wins, Matt retains, Ted wins, Undertaker wins, Diesel wins, Michaels beats Hart, Guerrero beats Rock, and Brock Lesnar retains the title. Brock Lesnar is probably going to be champion throughout the entirety of this sim. Okay, we got Steve versus Andre, Guerrero versus Big Show, Stratus versus Stephanie, Brett versus Vince, Rock versus Kane, a 30-man Royal Rumble match, Ted versus Matt for the IC title, and Shawn Michaels versus Brock, and Taker versus Warrior. So the Royal Rumble doesn't even main event the show. Steve beats Andre. Eddie beats Big Show. Stephanie retains. Brett beats Vince. The Rock beats Kane. I will check the news to see who's the Royal Rumble winner. Matt Hardy retains. Shawn Michaels beats Brock Lesnar and is the new WWE champion. And Warrior beats Taker. Who is the winner? Rumble winner. Undertaker is the Royal Rumble winner. We're most likely going to see Taker versus Michaels at WrestleMania. First, let's see what. Let's have this stuff first. Razor versus Rick. Jeff versus Bossman. Austin versus Vince. Ted versus Matt. Diesel versus Andre. Brock. Shawn. Big Show. Guerrero, Hart, and The Rock for the WWE title. And Kane versus Warrior. Razor Ramon beats Flair. Jeff beats Bossman. Austin beats Vince. Ted DiBiase is the new IC champion. Andre the Giant beats Diesel. Bret Hart wins the WWE Championship, so now there's a possibility that we will see Bret versus Undertaker at Mania. And now Warrior beats Kane. We on the last pay-per-view till Mania. We are at Fastlane. Final pay-per-view, Fastlane. We got Diesel versus Andre, Eddie versus Big Show, Stephanie, Trish, and Molly Holly in a triple threat match for the women's title. Warrior versus Vince, Jeff versus Ted, Kurt versus Dusty, Razor versus Randy, Lesnar versus Hart for the title. Fucking hell. Bret Hart better retain that shit. Michaels versus Austin, and Rock versus Kane. Let's see this. Diesel beats Andre. Eddie beats Big Show. Stephanie retains. Warrior beats Vince. Ted DiBiase retains. Dusty beats Kurt. Razor beats Randy. Bret Hart retains the WWE Championship. Thank the Lord. Shawn beats Steve. And Rock beats Kane. So your champions heading into WrestleMania are Bret for the WWE Championship, Ted DiBiase for the IC title, and Stephanie McMahon for the Women's title. And the WWE title starting off the show between Taker and Bret. We got Trish versus Stephanie for the Women's title. Vince versus Andre. Jim versus X-Pac. Jake Roberts versus Matt Hardy. Molly Holly versus Lita. A huge battle royal between Kurt Angle, Christian, Brutus Beefcake, Edge, Dusty Rhodes, Mark Henry, Ricky Steamboat, and Rowdy Piper. Wait, Andre is at WrestleMania. So is this really called... If Andre the Giant is in this universe now, then is this really called the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal? Or could we just call it the WrestleMania Memorial Battle Royal? I'll just stick with WrestleMania Memorial Battle Royal. Big Show versus Shawn Michaels. Razor Ramon versus Diesel. The Rock versus Kane. Eddie Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar. Ultimate Warrior versus Steve Austin. And Ted DiBiase, Jeff Hardy, and Big Boss Man in a triple threat match for the title. What do you... title. Bret beats Taker. Trish beats Stephanie. Andre beats Vince. X-Pac beats Jim Neidhart. Jake Roberts beats Matt Hardy. Wait, hold on. So Bret retains and Trish Stratus is the new women's champion. Lita beats Molly Holly. The winner of the WrestleMania Battle Royal is Rowdy Piper. Shawn Michaels beats The Big Show. Razor Ramon beats Diesel. The Rock beats Kane. Eddie beats Brock. Warrior beats Austin. And Jeff Hardy is your new IC champion. And there you have it. Here are your champions and your number one contenders. Bret Hart is your WWE champion. Actually, let's go down the contenders list. The contenders list is as follows. Number 1 is The Rock. Number 2 is Lesnar. Number 3 is Eddie. Number 4 is Big Show. Number 5 is Kane. Number 6 is Michaels. Number 7 is Ultimate Warrior. Number 8 is Undertaker. Number 9 is Razor Ramon. Number 10 is Steve Austin. 11 is Diesel. 12 Vince. 13 Randy Savage. 14 Andre. 15 Rick. And sadly, at the bottom of it, number 16 is Triple H. For the IC title, we got number 1, your champion is Jeff Hardy. Number 1's Ted. Number 2 is Boss Man. Number 3 is Christian. Number 4 is Ricky Steamboat. Number 5 is Mark Henry. Number 6, Kurt Angle. 7, Dusty. 8, Edge. 9, Brutus Beefcake. 10, Rowdy Piper. 11, Jim Neidhart. 12, X-Pac. 13, Jake Roberts. 14, Shane McMahon. 15, Matt Hardy. 16, Booker T. And 17, Papa Shango. Your women's champion is Trish Stratus, with Molly Holly being the number 1 contender. Number 2 is Lita, and number 3 is Stephanie McMahon. Oh yeah, and your current Mr. Money in the Bank is Brock Lesnar, who I thought already cashed it in already. I don't know. Go to championships. We are going to... Trish Stratus won the title off of Stephanie McMahon, who won it off of Lita. Jeff Hardy is your IC champion after winning it off of Ted DiBiase, who won it off of Matt Hardy, who won it off of Jake Roberts. Bret Hart is your WWE champion after defeating Shawn Michaels who had to defeat Brock Lesnar, who had to defeat Eddie Guerrero, who had to defeat Triple H. This was a short as hell stream. I might go live again later. I do not know. But yeah, other than that, I hope y'all enjoyed it. This is Con 6 510.